King James, who was the son of Mary Stuart. We believe his real father was James Ormiston.
Hey there, history buffs. Today, I'm diving into a captivating question that has puzzled historians for centuries. Was King James's father a mystery man? Many of you know King James VI of Scotland and I of England, the son of the famous Mary Stuart, also known as Mary, Queen of Scots. But what if I told you that his paternity isn't as clear-cut as it seems? Let's rewind to the 16th century. Mary Stuart was married to Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, a union that was supposed to cement her power. But their marriage was anything but harmonious. Darnley was known for his violent temper and reckless behavior, creating a toxic environment for Mary. Amidst this turmoil, rumors began to swirl about the true father of Mary's child, James. Now here's where things get interesting. Some historians argue that James Ormiston, a close confidant of Mary, might have been the real father. Ormiston was known for his loyalty to Mary and was deeply involved in the political intrigues of the time. He was even implicated in the murder of David Rizzio, Mary's private secretary, a crime that many believe was orchestrated by Darnley himself. So, how did Ormiston enter the picture as a potential father? There are several hints and whispers from contemporary sources suggesting a close relationship between Mary and Ormiston. Some accounts describe their interactions as more than just political alliance. But of course, in the volatile world of 16th century Scottish politics, separating fact from fiction is a tall order. Let's also consider the timing. James was born in 1566, a period when Mary and Darnley's relationship was at its lowest point. If rumors of an affair hold any truth, it's plausible that Mary sought solace in Ormiston. However, there's no definitive evidence to confirm this theory, and the official narrative remains that Darnley was the father. But why does this matter? Understanding the true lineage of King James could shed light on the political dynamics of his reign and the legitimacy of his rule. If Ormiston was indeed his father, it would add a layer of complexity to the already intricate history of the British monarchy. In the end, the mystery of King James's paternity may never be fully resolved, but it's these tantalizing questions that keep history so endlessly fascinating. So what do you think? Was James Ormiston the real father of King James?
The noblemen acquired their land through the kings and the queens of the country. And so if anything went wrong, if their relationship with Ben or whatever, the king or the queen could remove their land from them immediately. And so it's not like they owned the land, they were just assigned the land, that they will take over the name of the land sometimes. The titles of people back then were known by the name of their estate as opposed to their real name. So Mary, Queen of Scots. That's what most people know her as, Mary, Queen of Scots. But her name is Mary Stuart.
Have you ever heard of a noble losing everything overnight? Here's why it happened. Back in the days of kings and queens, noblemen didn't really own their land. Instead, they were assigned estates by the rulers of the realm. If they fell out of favor or messed up, that land could be snatched away faster than you could say, Your Majesty. Imagine being called Lord of somewhere instead of by your real name. That's how things worked. Nobles were known by their estates, not their family names. For example, Mary, Queen of Scots. Her real name was Mary Stuart. This system meant that titles and lands were always in a state of flux, tied to the whims of the king or queen. Oh, one wrong move and you'd be looking for a new place to call home. So next time you hear about a noble title, remember it's more like a fancy rental agreement with a very powerful landlord. And that, my friends, is one of the royal secrets of noble land ownership.
Key persons of the drama give the names of everybody of significance in Scotland, England, and France. And those are the three main countries. There are small amounts of information that we might want to talk about from Spain, but not much, because even though Mary Stuart courted noble people and available men who may be betrothed in Spain, there were no big things going on in this time period that would have been a real issue or concern, other than maybe some courtship stuff. It's not like they were battling country to country, but in Mary's country, Scotland, England, and France, they were all kind of at odds with each other. Back then, it was all about taking over land and controlling the land that you had and being in charge.
Mary Stuart was born into a world of power and peril. She became Queen of Scots when she was just 6 days old. Her life was marked by tragedy and drama from the very beginning. My father, King James V, died shortly after my birth, leaving Scotland in a precarious position. The country was caught between powerful neighbours and internal strife.
Mary spent her early years in France, raised at the French court, where she was groomed to be the future Queen of France. Mary married the Dauphin Francis in 1558 and became Queen of France in 1559. But her reign was short-lived, as Francis died in 1560, leaving Mary a widow at just 18.
I returned to Scotland in 1561 to find a country deeply divided. The Protestant Reformation had taken hold, and many Scottish nobles opposed my Catholic faith. I tried to navigate these troubled waters, seeking to balance the competing factions. But my reign was marked by constant challenges to my authority.
Mary's personal life was equally tumultuous. She married her cousin Lord Darnley in 1565, but this union was fraught with tension and violence. Darnley was later murdered, and Mary then married the Earl of Bothwell. This decision proved disastrous, leading to her forced abdication in 1567. Mary fled to England seeking help from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, but instead found herself a prisoner for the next 19 years. Scotland during Mary's reign was a hotbed of political and religious conflict. The most influential figure was John Knox, a fiery Protestant preacher who led the Scottish Reformation. Knox openly opposed Mary's Catholic faith, and his sermons and writings shaped public opinion, turning many Scots against their queen. James Stuart, Earl of Moray, was Mary's half-brother and played a complex role in her reign. At times he supported Mary, and at others he opposed her. Moray was a Protestant with strong ties to the English court and became Regent of Scotland after Mary's abdication. His shifting allegiances reflected the unstable nature of Scottish politics. The Earl of Bothwell was another key figure in Mary's drama. He was a powerful noble implicated in the murder of Lord Darnley and then married Mary in a controversial ceremony. This marriage led to widespread outrage and ultimately contributed to Mary's downfall. Other important Scottish nobles included the Earl of Lennox, who was Lord Darnley's father and sought justice for his son's murder, and the Earl of Morton, a Protestant leader who played a role in the plot against Darnley. These nobles, along with many others, formed shifting alliances and constantly vied for power and influence in the Scottish court.
Queen Elizabeth of England was Mary's cousin and rival. I am Protestant and see Mary as a threat to my throne. Many English Catholics view Mary as the rightful Queen of England, putting me in a difficult position. I have to balance political necessity with family ties.
William Cecil was Elizabeth's chief advisor. He was wary of Mary's claim to the English throne and worked tirelessly to protect Elizabeth's interests. Cecil monitored Scottish affairs closely and advised caution in dealing with Mary, feeling that supporting her could strengthen Catholic influence in Britain. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, was another influential figure at Elizabeth's court. He was a close friend and possible suitor of Elizabeth and was suggested as a potential husband for Mary. This proposal was part of Elizabeth's efforts to control Mary's marriage prospects, but the plan never came to fruition. Francis Walsingham served as Elizabeth's spy master and played a crucial role in uncovering plots against the Queen. Walsingham's network of spies kept a close watch on Mary, gathering evidence that eventually led to her execution. These English courtiers shaped Elizabeth's policies towards Scotland and Mary. Section 4. French Connections, the Guise family and royal ambitions. The House of Guise was a powerful French noble family. They were Mary's maternal relatives. The Guises held significant influence at the French court. They saw Mary as a way to extend their power into Scotland and potentially England.
Mary of Guise, Mary Stuart's mother, was a key figure. She served as Regent of Scotland during Mary's youth. Mary of Guise worked to maintain French influence in Scotland. She faced opposition from Protestant nobles. Her rule helped shape the political landscape Mary would inherit.
Francis II, Mary's first husband, was King of France for a brief period. Their marriage was part of the Old Alliance between Scotland and France. This alliance aimed to counter English influence. Francis's early death changed the political dynamics. It left Mary in a vulnerable position.
Catherine de' Medici, the Queen Mother of France, was another important player. She wielded significant power at the French court. Catherine initially supported Mary. However, her priorities shifted after Francis II's death. She focused on securing her younger son's positions. This left Mary with less support from the French crown.
Section 5. Spain's limited role in the Scottish drama. Philip II of Spain was Europe's most powerful Catholic monarch. He had an interest in British affairs. Philip saw potential in supporting Catholic claims in Britain. This included Mary's claim to the English throne. However, Spain's involvement in Scottish matters was limited.
Spain's primary focus was on maintaining its vast empire. I was engaged in conflicts in the Netherlands and with the Ottoman Empire. These issues took precedence over Scottish affairs.
Spain did offer some diplomatic support to Mary, but this support never translated into significant action. The Spanish ambassador in England, Bernardino de Mendoza, did work to support Catholic interests. He was involved in some plots to aid Mary. However, these efforts were not backed by substantial Spanish resources. Mendoza was eventually expelled from England for his involvement in these schemes.
Spain's limited role in the Scottish drama was partly due to geography. Scotland was far from Spain's sphere of direct influence. The English Channel provided a formidable barrier to Spanish intervention. This physical distance made it difficult for Spain to play a more active role in Scottish affairs.
Section 6. The lasting impact of Mary's era on European history. The drama surrounding Mary, Queen of Scots, had far-reaching consequences. It shaped the religious and political landscape of Britain for generations. The conflicts of this era set the stage for the eventual union of the English and Scottish crowns. This union came about under Mary's son, James VI and I.
The religious tensions of my mother's time continued to simmer. They eventually erupted in the English Civil War of the next century. The struggle between Catholicism and Protestantism remained a defining feature of British politics. It influenced domestic and foreign policy for centuries to come.
Mary's execution in 1587 had significant diplomatic repercussions. It contributed to the deterioration of relations between England and Spain. This tension culminated in the Spanish Armada of 1588. The defeat of the Armada marked a turning point in European power dynamics.
The era of Mary, Queen of Scots, also saw the rise of new forms of statecraft. The extensive use of spies and informants became a hallmark of governance. This period witnessed the birth of modern diplomacy and intelligence gathering. These practices would continue to evolve and shape international relations in the centuries that followed.
So obviously, in Scotland, James V is Mary Stuart's father. Marie de Guise is Mary's father's wife. Mary Stuart, she was Queen of Scotland. She's our main person here that we're talking about. So, like, Mary's father was born in 1512, and he died in 1542. Mary Stuart, Mary Queen of Scotland, she was born in 1542, just a few days from when her father died. So, her whole life, she did not know her father. Then there's Dr. James Stuart, Earl of Moray. He was an illegitimate son of James V, her father. There were many illegitimate children, as you'll see when we go through this. And back then, there was an okay thing to do. The king, before they got married, even after they got married, they had illegitimate children. They had relationships with women. And when the women had children, they were considered bastard children, but they also were taken care of by the king. Their families were given money, and sometimes they were given land. This James Stuart, Earl of Moray, the illegitimate son of James VI by Margaret Douglas, he was a half-brother to Mary Queen of Scots. He caused conflict and confusion. He'd side with her, and then he would side with the other nobles and regents, but he was kind of a force against her because he was an illegitimate son And I think he really wanted to be king and probably felt he could be king over her being queen. So there was a lot of problems that he created for her.
James Stuart, later known as the Earl of Moray, was born into a world of privilege and uncertainty. His father was King James V of Scotland. His mother was Lady Margaret Douglas. But there was a catch. James was illegitimate. He was born out of wedlock in 1531. This status would shape his entire life and career. Despite his illegitimacy, James was acknowledged by his royal father. He was raised at the Scottish court. He received an education befitting a nobleman. James V even granted him lands and titles. These included the Earldom of Moray in 1562, but James could never inherit the throne. This limitation would fuel his ambitions and resentments in years to come. James's early years were marked by political turmoil. His father died when James was just 11. His half-sister Mary became Queen of Scots as an infant. The young queen was sent to France for her safety. James, meanwhile, navigated the treacherous waters of Scottish politics. He learned to be cunning and adaptable. These skills would serve him well in his adult life. As he grew older, James Stuart became a prominent figure in Scottish affairs. He was known for his intelligence and charisma. He was also a staunch Protestant. This put him at odds with the Catholic faction at court. It would later cause friction with his Catholic half-sister, Queen Mary. James's illegitimate birth may have barred him from the throne, but it did not stop him from wielding significant power and influence in Scotland. Illegitimate children were a common feature of royal courts across Europe. Kings and nobles often had offspring outside of marriage. These children occupied a unique and often precarious position. They were of royal blood, but not in the line of succession. They could be favored one day and cast aside the next. Their fortunes depended on the whims of their royal parents. In some cases, illegitimate children were openly acknowledged and given titles. Henry Fitzroy, son of Henry VIII, was made Duke of Richmond. In France, several illegitimate royal children became respected military leaders. But these were exceptions. Most royal bastards lived in the shadows. They were denied the full privileges of their legitimate siblings. They often faced stigma and discrimination. The treatment of illegitimate children varied across Europe. In some countries, they were completely excluded from court life. In others, they were integrated to varying degrees. The Catholic Church frowned upon illegitimacy. This added to the social and legal challenges these children faced. But pragmatic monarchs often found ways to use their illegitimate offspring. They could be valuable political pawns or loyal supporters. James Stuart's experience was typical in many ways. He was acknowledged, but could not inherit the throne. He received education and titles, but was always aware of his lesser status. This created a complex psychology. Many illegitimate royal children felt torn between gratitude and resentment. They had access to power, but were forever outsiders. This tension often led to political intrigue and conflict. James Stuart's life would be a prime example of this dynamic. James Stuart's relationship with Mary, Queen of Scots, was central to his life and career. They were half-siblings, sharing a father in James V, but their lives took very different paths. Mary became queen as an infant and was raised in France. James remained in Scotland, building his power base. When Mary returned to Scotland in 1561, their relationship became crucial to the country's future. At first, James acted as a loyal advisor to his half-sister. He helped her navigate the complex world of Scottish politics. Mary relied on his knowledge and experience. She even granted him the Earldom of Moray in 1562. This seemed to cement their alliance. But beneath the surface, tensions were brewing. James was a staunch Protestant, Mary was Catholic. This religious divide would prove to be a significant source of conflict. As time went on, James's ambitions began to clash with Mary's rule. He opposed her marriage to Lord Darnley in 1565. This led to a brief period of rebellion known as the Chase About Raid. James was forced to flee to England, but he soon returned and regained his position at court. This pattern of conflict and reconciliation would repeat throughout their relationship. The most dramatic turn came after the murder of Lord Darnley in 1567. James initially supported Mary, but he soon turned against her when she married the Earl of Bothwell. James played a key role in forcing Mary's abdication. He then became regent for her infant son, James VI. This final betrayal marked the end of their cooperative relationship. It set the stage for years of conflict that would shape Scottish history. Section 4. Political manoeuvring and shifting loyalties. James Stuart was a master of political manoeuvring. He navigated the turbulent waters of Scottish politics with skill and cunning. His career was marked by shifting alliances and calculated risks. At times, he supported Queen Mary. At others, he allied with her opponents. This flexibility allowed him to survive and thrive in a dangerous political landscape. In the early years of Mary's reign, James was a key supporter of the pro-English Protestant faction. He advocated for closer ties with England and Elizabeth I. This put him at odds with the Catholic pro-French nobles at court, but it also gave him valuable connections with the English government. These connections would prove useful throughout his career. James's loyalty to Mary was always conditional. He supported her when it suited his interests, but he was quick to oppose her when he disagreed with her decisions. The Chaseabout raid of 1565 was a prime example. James rebelled against Mary's marriage to Lord Darnley. He was defeated and forced into exile, but he soon managed to reconcile with Mary and return to court. Perhaps the most dramatic shift in James's loyalties came after Lord Darnley's murder. Initially, James supported Mary and helped investigate the crime. But when Mary married the Earl of Bothwell, a suspect in the murder, James turned against her. He joined with other nobles to force her abdication. This move allowed James to become regent for the infant James VI. It was the pinnacle of his political career, achieved through careful maneuvering and opportunism. Section 5. Ambition's price: conflict with Mary, Queen of Scots. James Stuart's ambitions often put him in direct conflict with Mary, Queen of Scots. As an illegitimate son, he could never inherit the throne, but this didn't stop him from seeking power and influence. Many historians believe James wanted to be king in all but name. This desire led to numerous clashes with his half-sister throughout her reign. One major source of conflict was religion. James was a committed Protestant, Mary was Catholic. This divide reflected broader tensions in Scottish society. James often pushed for Protestant reforms. Mary resisted, trying to maintain a balance between the two faiths. This religious disagreement underlay many of their political conflicts. James also opposed many of Mary's personal decisions. He was against her marriage to Lord Darnley in 1565. This led to the Chaseabout raid, where James briefly rebelled. He also criticized her relationship with David Rizzio, her private secretary. Some historians suggest James may have been involved in Rizzio's murder in 1566. These interventions in Mary's personal life show how far James was willing to go to maintain his influence. The ultimate conflict came after the murder of Lord Darnley. James initially supported Mary, but when she married the Earl of Bothwell, James turned against her. He joined other nobles in forcing her abdication. This move allowed James to become regent for Mary's infant son. It was a clear demonstration of James's ambition. He had effectively removed his half-sister from power and taken control of the government himself. Section 6. Legacy of the Earl of Moray shaping Scottish history. James Stuart's actions had a profound impact on Scottish history. His conflicts with Mary, Queen of Scots, contributed to her downfall. This changed the course of the Scottish monarchy. It paved the way for the reign of James VI, who would later become James I of England. In this way, James Stuart played a role in the events leading to the union of the crowns. As regent for the young James VI, Moray shaped Scottish policy for several years. He promoted Protestant reforms and closer ties with England. These policies had long-lasting effects on Scotland's religious and political landscape. They strengthened the Protestant cause in Scotland. They also laid groundwork for the eventual union with England in 1707. James Stuart's life also provides a fascinating case study in the role of illegitimate royal children. His career shows how such individuals could wield significant power, but it also demonstrates the limitations and challenges they faced. James's story highlights the complex dynamics of royal families in this period. It shows how personal relationships, could have far-reaching political consequences. The legacy of James Stuart, Earl of Moray, is complex and controversial. Some see him as a skilled politician who helped steer Scotland through turbulent times. Others view him as an ambitious schemer who betrayed his half-sister for personal gain. Whatever one's perspective, there's no denying his significant impact on Scottish history. His life and career continue to fascinate historians and the public alike. They offer valuable insights into the politics, religion and social dynamics of 16th century Scotland.
Henry Stuart was her husband, the one she married from England. He was the great-grandson of Henry VII through his mother, Lady Lennox, who was niece of Henry VIII. So you can sort of see here how close Mary's family is to England, because they would marry the kings and queens of the monarchy. They would betroth the child. So Henry VIII is desperately trying to have boys and to take over as king and to ally with the country next door to strengthen their territory. And so there was a lot of conversation and a lot of wheeling and dealing to marry into the families of England or France. So that would have been a big deal. That way, England could more easily take over Scotland. And if she married, and she did, she was betrothed and married the son of the king in France at a young age. And so they would have been next in line for that country if their parent passed away.
The marriage of Mary, Queen of Scots, to Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, was no ordinary union. It was a pivotal moment in British history. The wedding took place on the 29th of July, 1565, at Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh. Mary was 22 years old. Henry was just 19. Their marriage was brief but explosive. It would shape the future of Scotland and England for generations to come. Mary was already Queen of Scotland when she married Henry. She had been crowned as an infant after her father's death. Henry was her first cousin. He had a strong claim to the English throne. This made their marriage a matter of great political importance. It was not just about love or personal preference. It was about power, succession, and the future of two kingdoms. The union of Mary and Henry was controversial from the start. Many Scottish nobles opposed it. They feared Henry's ambition and his Catholic faith. Elizabeth I of England was also alarmed. She saw the marriage as a threat to her own position. The couple went ahead despite these objections. They were married in a Catholic ceremony, further angering Protestant reformers in Scotland. Their marriage was turbulent and short-lived. Henry proved to be an unsuitable consort. He was immature, arrogant, and prone to drunkenness. Mary soon grew disillusioned with him. Their relationship deteriorated rapidly. Less than 2 years after their wedding, Henry was murdered. The circumstances were suspicious. Many believed Mary was involved. This scandal would eventually lead to her downfall and exile to England. The family trees of Mary, Queen of Scots, and Henry Stuart were deeply intertwined with those of the English and French monarchies. Mary was the daughter of James V of Scotland and Marie de Guise. Her father was the son of Margaret Tudor, sister to Henry VIII of England. This made Mary the great-niece of Henry VIII and a cousin to Elizabeth I. Her claim to the English throne was strong. Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, had an equally impressive lineage. He was the son of Matthew Stuart, 4th Earl of Lennox, and Lady Margaret Douglas. His mother was the daughter of Margaret Tudor from her second marriage. This meant Henry was also a great-nephew of Henry VIII. Like Mary, he had a claim to the English throne through his Tudor ancestry. The French connection came through Mary's first marriage. She had been the Queen Consort of France as the wife of Francis II. This marriage had been arranged when Mary was a child. It was part of the Old Alliance between Scotland and France. Though Francis died young, Mary's ties to the French court remained strong. These connections worried the English, who feared a Catholic alliance against them. These complex family ties made Mary and Henry's marriage a matter of international concern. It brought together two strong claims to the English throne. This alarmed Elizabeth I, who was unmarried and childless. The marriage threatened to create a powerful Catholic bloc that could challenge Protestant England. It was a union with far-reaching implications for the balance of power in Europe. Henry VIII's desperate attempts to secure male heirs and form alliances through marriage are legendary. His first marriage was to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess. This union was meant to cement an alliance with Spain, but it failed to produce a male heir. Henry's obsession with having a son led him to break with the Catholic Church. He divorced Catherine and married Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn also failed to give Henry a son. She bore him a daughter, Elizabeth. Henry had her executed on trumped-up charges of treason. He then married Jane Seymour. She gave him his longed-for son, Edward, but Jane died shortly after childbirth. Henry's next marriage was purely political. He wed Anne of Cleves to form an alliance with German Protestant princes. The marriage to Anne of Cleves was a disaster. Henry found her unattractive and quickly divorced her. He then married Catherine Howard, a young cousin of Anne Boleyn. This marriage ended in tragedy. Catherine was executed for adultery. Henry's final marriage was to Catherine Parr. She was a more mature woman who helped reconcile Henry with his daughters. Henry's marital history shows how royal marriages were used as political tools. Each union was carefully calculated to bring maximum benefit to the crown. Personal feelings were secondary. The primary goals were to secure the succession and form valuable alliances. Henry's actions had far-reaching consequences. They changed the religious landscape of England and altered the course of the Tudor dynasty. Section 4. Marriage as a political tool, power and expansion. Royal marriages in the 16th century were primarily about power and expansion. They were not romantic unions. They were carefully negotiated contracts. These marriages could bring together kingdoms, end wars, or create powerful alliances. The personal feelings of the bride and groom were rarely considered. What mattered was the political advantage gained through the union. One of the most significant aspects of these marriages was territorial expansion. A well-planned royal marriage could add vast territories to a kingdom. For example, the marriage of Isabella of Castile to Ferdinand of Aragon united Spain. This created a powerful new kingdom that would dominate European politics for centuries. Similarly, the marriage of Mary Tudor to Philip II of Spain briefly brought England into a personal union with Spain. These marriages also served to secure peace between rival nations. The marriage of Henry VIII to Catherine of Aragon was intended to maintain peace between England and Spain. Even when such marriages didn't result in lasting peace, they often provided a period of stability. This allowed kingdoms to rebuild their strength or focus on other threats. Royal marriages were also used to strengthen claims to thrones. This was particularly important in an era when succession was often disputed. By marrying into a royal family with a strong claim to a throne, a monarch could improve their own position. This was part of the motivation behind the marriage of Mary, Queen of Scots, to Henry Stuart. Their union combined two strong claims to the English throne. Section 5. The personal cost of royal ambitions. The political machinations behind royal marriages often came at a great personal cost to those involved. Monarchs and their children were essentially pawns in a larger game of power and diplomacy. Their personal desires and happiness were secondary to the needs of the state. This often led to unhappy marriages and personal tragedies. Mary, Queen of Scots, is a prime example of the personal sacrifices demanded by royal duty. Her first marriage to Francis II of France was arranged when she was a child. She had no say in the matter. After Francis died, she returned to Scotland and married Henry Stuart. This marriage, while more of her own choosing, was still heavily influenced by political considerations. It ended in tragedy with Henry's murder. The personal cost was not limited to the monarchs themselves. Their children were often used as bargaining chips from an early age. Princesses were betrothed to foreign princes they had never met. They were sent to live in strange courts with different customs and languages. Many faced hostility and loneliness in their new homes. Some, like Catherine of Aragon, were left in limbo when political alliances shifted. The pressure to produce heirs added another layer of personal stress to royal marriages. Queens who failed to bear sons often faced dire consequences. They could be set aside, as Catherine of Aragon was, or even executed, like Anne Boleyn. The need for male heirs drove Henry VIII to desperate measures, including breaking with the Catholic Church. This obsession with succession shaped the personal lives of monarchs and had far-reaching consequences for their kingdoms.
So you'll find, like Lord Darnley here, Henry Stuart, he was really kind of like a cousin to her because of the way they married their people off, arranged marriages. So they would be maybe a second cousin or a third cousin. They did that. That was kind of normal back then. Then James, who was the son of Mary Stuart. We believe his real father was James Ormiston. So there's James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. Bothwell is really the estate. So he's the Earl of the estate of Bothwell. That's what that means. James Ormiston had married a Sinclair. There were different Sinclair families, and they had different spellings of their name. And it's the same thing with Ormiston. There's different variations of Ormiston. There's even another Ormiston family that's written into a lot of these books that really was not James Ormiston's line, but a different line. They were more allied and loyal to England as opposed to Scotland. So those Ormiston kind of caused some problems for James Ormiston too.
In the world of royalty, marriage was rarely about love. It was a strategic game. Families used marriages to form alliances. These unions were crucial for power and stability. Royal families across Europe were all interconnected through marriage. Scotland was no exception to this practice. Scottish nobles married strategically too. They aimed to strengthen their positions and secure their lineages. The royal house of Stuart was particularly adept at this game. They forged connections with powerful families both within and outside Scotland. These marriages created a complex web of relationships. Cousins often married cousins. This practice kept power within a small circle of families. It also led to some interesting genetic consequences. Many royals shared common ancestors, which sometimes resulted in health issues. The practice of arranged marriages had far-reaching effects. It influenced politics, diplomacy, and succession. Marriages could end wars or start them. They could unite kingdoms or divide them. In Scotland, these unions would play a crucial role in shaping the country's future. Lord Darnley and Mary Stuart's marriage was one for the history books. Mary was the Queen of Scots, a powerful woman in her own right. Darnley was her first cousin. He was handsome and charming, but also ambitious and reckless. Their union was meant to strengthen Mary's claim to the English throne. The marriage started well, but quickly soured. Darnley proved to be a difficult husband. He was jealous of Mary's power and influence. He demanded to be named King of Scots, not just King Consort. This caused tension between the couple and within the Scottish court. Henry Stuart, things took a dark turn when Darnley became involved in a plot. He and a group of nobles murdered Mary's secretary, David Rizzio. This act was brutal and happened in front of the pregnant Mary. It was a shocking betrayal that Mary never truly forgave. Mary Stuart, the marriage ended in tragedy. Darnley was murdered in 1567. The circumstances were suspicious. Many believed I was involved in the plot. This event would lead to my downfall and eventual imprisonment. It's a stark example of how royal marriages could go terribly wrong. James Ormiston is a figure shrouded in mystery. There were whispers about his true parentage. Some believed he was of royal blood. These rumors added an air of intrigue to his story. They also highlight how complicated royal lineages could be. The speculation about Ormiston's parentage was never confirmed. It's possible it was just gossip. But in the world of royal politics, such rumors could be powerful. They could influence alliances and loyalties. Even unproven claims of royal blood could change a person's status. James Ormiston. My life was intertwined with the Scottish nobility. I was involved in the politics of the day. My alleged royal connections may have helped me navigate this complex world, but they also put me at the center of dangerous intrigues. The mystery of Ormiston's parentage reminds us of the complexities of royal families. Illegitimate children were not uncommon. They often played important roles in court politics. Ormiston's story, whether true or not, shows how bloodlines and rumors could shape a person's destiny in this world.
The infamous Earl of Bothwell.
James Hepburn, better known as the Earl of Bothwell, was a key figure in Scottish history. He was a powerful nobleman with a controversial reputation.
Bothwell was known for his ambition and his loyalty to Mary, Queen of Scots.
His actions would have far-reaching consequences for the Scottish monarchy. The title Earl of Bothwell was an important one in Scotland. It came with significant lands and power.
Bothwell used this position to become one of the most influential men in the country. He was a skilled politician and a fierce warrior.
These qualities made him both admired and feared. Bothwell's estate was extensive. It included lands in the Scottish borders and in East Lothian.
This wealth gave him considerable influence. It also made him a target for those who sought to challenge the crown.
Bothwell's power would play a crucial role in the events surrounding Mary Stuart's reign. The Earl of Bothwell is perhaps best known for his relationship with Mary Stuart.
He became my third husband under scandalous circumstances.
Many believed he was involved in the murder of Mary's second husband, Lord Darnley. This marriage to Mary would ultimately lead to her downfall and Bothwell's own exile and imprisonment.
Ormiston and Sinclair, a marriage of names.
The marriage of James Ormiston to Sinclair was more than just a union of two people. It was a joining of two powerful Scottish families. The Ormistons and the Sinclairs both had long histories in Scotland.
Their alliance through marriage was significant for Scottish politics.
Marriages like this one were common among noble families. They were a way to strengthen alliances and increase influence. The Ormiston-Sinclair marriage would have been carefully arranged. Both families would have considered the political and financial benefits.
One interesting aspect of this marriage was the variation in family names. Scottish naming conventions were complex. Surnames could change based on land ownership or political allegiance.
The Ormiston name, for example, had several variations. These included Ormiston, Ormiston, and Ormstone. The Sinclair family also had its own variations. These name changes can make tracing family histories challenging, but they also tell us a lot about how families adapted to changing political landscapes.
The Ormiston-Sinclair marriage would have brought together these different naming traditions.
Divided loyalties, the Ormiston families.
The Ormiston name was shared by several families in Scotland, but not all Ormistons were alike. Different branches of the family had different loyalties. Some were staunchly Scottish, others had stronger ties to England. This division reflects the complex political landscape of the time.
Scotland and England had a long history of conflict. Many Scottish families found themselves torn between the two kingdoms.
The Ormistons were no exception. Some members of the family supported Scottish independence. Others saw advantages in closer ties with England.
These divided loyalties could cause tension within families. Brothers might find themselves on opposite sides of a conflict. Cousins could be political rivals.
The Ormiston families navigated these treacherous waters as best they could. Their choices would have lasting impacts on their fortunes. The story of the Ormiston families is a microcosm of Scottish history. It shows how personal relationships and family ties intersected with national politics.
The choices made by these families helped shape the future of Scotland.
Their story reminds us that history is made up of individual decisions and complex loyalties.
But James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, he and James Ormiston were helpful to each other. They were cousins through the Sinclair line, the women that they married. Their names are kind of synonymous because they helped each other out. And all of these things that they were doing for Mary, Queen of Scots, and her mother. Her mother is really kind of a key player because when Mary's father died within a week of Mary being born, Mary's mother, Mary de Guise, she took over being in charge of Scotland. The people in Scotland were rogue. They were rough. They were not genteel people. So there's always a lot of pressure on her. The nobles were always putting a lot of pressure on her to have more and be more. She was trying to maintain peace and diplomacy, and she was a French woman, but she knew how to be more genteel, but she also had to learn the rough ways of Scotland. When Mary was a young girl, James Ormiston and James Ormiston's uncle to help her out. James Ormiston was an emissary, so he was someone who'd take messages back and forth between Scotland, England, France, get on horseback and take messages back and forth between the monarchy He was very important.
Mary Stuart, born on December 8, 1542, entered the world as a princess and became Queen of Scots mere days later. Her father, James V, died shortly after her birth, leaving the infant monarch in a precarious position. From the outset, Mary's life was marked by political intrigue and power struggles. The young queen's early years were shaped by the ambitious plans of both Scottish nobles and foreign powers. Mary's childhood was far from ordinary. As a royal infant, she was guarded closely and raised with all the pomp befitting her status. Yet the spectre of danger loomed large. England's King Henry VIII sought to control Scotland through a marriage alliance between Mary and his son Edward. This proposal was met with resistance from many Scottish nobles who feared English domination. Amidst these tumultuous times, Mary's mother, Marie de Guise, emerged as a formidable protector and regent. A French noblewoman of the powerful House of Guise, Marie was determined to safeguard her daughter's throne. She skillfully maneuvered through the treacherous waters of Scottish politics, forming alliances and fending off threats to Mary's rule. As Mary grew, she was educated in the French court, far from the strife of her homeland. This decision, made by Marie de Guise, would have far-reaching consequences for the young queen's future. In France, Mary blossomed into a charming and accomplished young woman, fluent in multiple languages and well-versed in the arts. However, her absence from Scotland would later prove to be a significant challenge when she returned to rule her native land. Marie de Guise, Mary's mother, assumed the role of Queen Regent in 1554. She faced a daunting task: to govern a fractious kingdom torn by religious strife and noble rivalries. Marie's reign as regent was marked by her astute political acumen and unwavering determination to preserve her daughter's throne. She navigated the complex web of alliances and enmities with remarkable skill. One of Marie's primary challenges was the rising tide of Protestant reform in Scotland. The Catholic regent found herself at odds with influential Protestant lords, led by figures such as John Knox. Despite her personal religious convictions, Marie initially adopted a policy of religious tolerance. This pragmatic approach was aimed at maintaining stability in the realm and preventing outright rebellion. Marie's regency was also characterized by her efforts to strengthen Scotland's ties with France. This old alliance was seen as a counterbalance to English influence and aggression. Marie worked tirelessly to secure French military and financial support, which proved crucial in maintaining her position and defending Scotland's interests against English incursions. However, Marie's pro-French policies and her steadfast Catholicism eventually led to increasing opposition from Protestant nobles. The regent found herself caught between conflicting loyalties and interests. As the religious Reformation gained momentum in Scotland, Marie's position became increasingly precarious. Despite these challenges, she remained a formidable figure, fighting to the very end to secure her daughter's inheritance and Scotland's independence. Marie de Guise's reign as regent was a masterclass in diplomatic maneuvering. She skillfully balanced the competing interests of various factions within Scotland, while also dealing with external pressures from England and France. Her ability to forge alliances and negotiate compromises was crucial in maintaining a semblance of stability in the realm. One of Marie's most significant diplomatic achievements was the Treaty of Haddington in 1548. This agreement secured French support for Scotland and arranged for the young Queen Mary to be sent to France for her education and future marriage to the Dauphin. While this move was controversial among some Scottish nobles, it effectively safeguarded Mary from English attempts to control her. Marie's diplomatic skills were also evident in her handling of religious tensions. Despite her personal Catholic faith, she initially pursued a policy of moderation towards Protestants. This approach was designed to prevent open conflict and maintain peace in the kingdom. Marie negotiated with Protestant leaders, offering concessions while still protecting Catholic interests. However, as the Protestant Reformation gained momentum, Marie's position became increasingly untenable. The arrival of English troops in support of the Protestant lords in 1559 marked a turning point. Marie's diplomatic efforts shifted to securing French military aid to counter this threat. Her determination and resourcefulness in these final years of her regency demonstrated her unwavering commitment to her daughter's cause and the independence of Scotland. Section 4. Loyal allies James Hepburn and James Ormiston. Among the most steadfast supporters of Mary, Queen of Scots, were James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, and James Ormiston. These men played crucial roles in Mary's tumultuous reign, offering their loyalty and support during some of her most challenging times. Bothwell, in particular, would become a central figure in Mary's life and the subject of much historical debate. James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell, was a powerful Scottish nobleman known for his military prowess and unwavering loyalty to the crown. He first came to prominence during the reign of Mary's mother, Mary de Guise, serving as Lord High Admiral of Scotland. Bothwell's support for the Catholic cause and his opposition to the Protestant lords aligned him closely with Mary's interests. James Ormiston, while less prominent in historical accounts, was nonetheless a significant figure in Mary's circle. A loyal supporter of Bothwell, Ormiston was involved in many of the key events of Mary's reign. His unwavering allegiance to Bothwell, and by extension to Mary, would have far-reaching consequences for all involved. As Mary's reign progressed and she faced increasing opposition from Protestant nobles, the support of men like Bothwell and Ormiston became increasingly crucial. Their military expertise and political influence helped Mary maintain her position in the face of growing threats. However, their close association with the Queen would also become a source of controversy and ultimately contribute to her downfall. Section 5. Weaving a web of support, key figures in Mary's life. The web of support surrounding Mary, Queen of Scots, was complex and ever-changing. Beyond her mother and loyal nobles like Bothwell and Ormiston, there were other key figures who played significant roles in shaping Mary's reign and personal life. These individuals, each with their own motivations and allegiances, formed an intricate tapestry of relationships around the young Queen. One such figure was Mary of Guise's half-brother, Francis, Duke of Guise. A powerful French nobleman, Francis provided crucial support to his sister during her regency and continued to be an influential figure in Mary's life even after she returned to Scotland. His military and political backing helped maintain the old alliance between Scotland and France. On the Protestant side, Mary's illegitimate half-brother, James Stuart, Earl of Moray, emerged as a significant player. Initially supportive of Mary's rule, Moray would later become one of her most formidable opponents. His shifting allegiances reflect the complex and often treacherous nature of Scottish politics during this period. Mary's ladies-in-waiting, known as the Four Marys, also played a crucial role in her personal life. Mary Seton, Mary Beaton, Mary Fleming and Mary Livingston were constant companions to the Queen, providing emotional support and serving as confidants throughout her turbulent reign. Their loyalty to Mary, even in her darkest hours, is a testament to the strong bonds formed within her inner circle. Section 6. The enduring legacy of Mary's inner circle. The influence of Mary's supporters and confidants extended far beyond her own lifetime. The actions and decisions of figures like Marie de Guise, Bothwell and Ormiston had lasting repercussions on Scottish history and the broader European political landscape. Their loyalty, for better or worse, shaped the course of Mary's reign and ultimately contributed to her tragic fate. Marie de Guise's legacy is particularly significant. Her efforts to maintain Scotland's independence and her skillful navigation of the religious and political turmoil of her time laid the groundwork for many of the developments that followed. The policies she pursued during her regency, particularly her balancing act between Catholic and Protestant interests, foreshadowed the religious compromises that would eventually emerge in Scotland. The support of men like Bothwell and Ormiston, while crucial to Mary's rule, also contributed to her downfall. Their involvement in controversial events, such as the murder of Mary's second husband, Lord Darnley, tarnished the Queen's reputation and provided ammunition for her enemies. Yet their unwavering loyalty to Mary, even in exile and disgrace, speaks to the powerful bonds forged in the crucible of 16th century Scottish politics. The enduring fascination with Mary, Queen of Scots, owes much to the colourful cast of characters that surrounded her. From her formidable mother to her loyal nobles and ladies-in-waiting, these individuals helped shape the narrative of Mary's life and reign. Their stories, intertwined with Mary's own, continue to captivate historians and the public alike, ensuring that the legacy of this ill-fated queen and her supporters lives on in the annals of history.
Uncle Hobbs Ormiston was in charge of the horses for the king before the king died, and then I'm sure he continues to be in charge of the horses for Mary's mother. And they just helped out in a lot of different ways, transporting, getting on a ship to go across the channel to France and back and forth. They would escort people. They were there to help out the queen and her daughter. Then William Maitland of Lethington, he was Secretary of State to Mary Queen of Scots. It's kind of like Secretary of State for the United States. They were basically key people. These are people who helped with the whole running things in the country. Another diplomat that Mary used was Sir James Melville. There were other earls, like this is the Earl Morton, James Douglas. And most of these earls were all playing a game with the king and the queens of the country because they're trying to keep their land that had been assigned to them and to grow their land. And so if there was a battle that broke out, the earls would have their own military, and they might be fighting an earl of another part of Scotland. They had in-country battles and out-of-country battles, and sometimes they'd have to unite all of their military to fight off England, to fight off France. So they were separate at times, and then there are times when they were united.
Mary Stuart ascended to the Scottish throne in 1542. She was just 6 days old. Her reign was marked by intrigue and turmoil. The young queen needed capable advisors to navigate the treacherous waters of 16th century politics. Her court was a hub of activity and ambition. It was filled with nobles, diplomats, and servants, each playing a crucial role. The Scottish court was a complex machine. It required many hands to keep it running smoothly. From stable masters to secretaries, each position was vital. These roles were often filled by members of noble families. They saw court positions as a way to gain influence and power. The Queen relied on these individuals to help her rule effectively.
My reign is a challenging time for Scotland. The country is divided by religious conflicts and caught between the machinations of England and France. In this volatile environment, my advisors are more important than ever. They help shape policy and maintain diplomatic relations. Their actions will have far-reaching consequences for the kingdom.
The power players in Mary's court were a diverse group. They came from different backgrounds and held various beliefs. Some were loyal to the core, while others had their own agendas. Understanding these key figures is crucial to grasping the complexities of Mary's reign. Their stories provide insight into the political landscape of 16th century Scotland. Uncle Hobbs Ormiston held a unique position in Mary's court. He was the master of the royal stables. This role was more important than it might first appear. Horses were essential for transportation and warfare in the 16th century. Ormiston was responsible for maintaining the royal stables. He ensured that the king and queen always had suitable mounts. Ormiston's duties were varied and demanding. He oversaw the care and training of the royal horses. This included selecting the best breeds for the royal family. He also managed a large staff of grooms and stable hands. His role required a deep knowledge of horsemanship and animal husbandry. Ormiston was known for his expertise in these areas. The master of the royal stables also had ceremonial duties. He would accompany the monarchs on formal processions. Ormiston was responsible for the impressive display of horses on these occasions. His work contributed to the grandeur and majesty of royal events. This helped to reinforce the power and prestige of the monarchy. Ormiston's position gave him regular access to the royal family. This made him a valuable source of information and influence. He was privy to the comings and goings of the court. His role in managing the stables also gave him insight into military matters. Horses were crucial for warfare, and Ormiston's knowledge was often sought in times of conflict.
As Secretary of State to Mary, Queen of Scots, my role is crucial in the day-to-day running of the kingdom. I handle official correspondence and draft letters and documents on behalf of the Queen. My position requires great skill in diplomacy and politics. I'm known for my sharp intellect and political acumen. I often act as an advisor to the Queen on matters of state. My duties include negotiating with foreign powers and maintaining Scotland's delicate relationships with England and France. My diplomatic skills have been put to the test many times during my tenure.
The Secretary of State also had domestic responsibilities. He helped to coordinate the activities of various government departments. Maitland worked closely with other members of the Privy Council. He was involved in drafting laws and managing the royal finances. His influence extended to many aspects of Scottish governance. Maitland's career was not without controversy. He was known for his shifting loyalties. At times, he supported Mary's claim to the English throne. At other times, he worked to protect Scottish interests against English interference. This flexibility made him a complex and sometimes divisive figure. Despite this, his skills were invaluable to Mary's administration. Section 4. Sir James Melville, Diplomat Extraordinaire. Sir James Melville was one of Mary's most trusted diplomats. He represented Scotland in various European courts. Melville's career took him to France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire. His role was to promote Scottish interests abroad. He also gathered valuable intelligence for the Queen. Melville's diplomatic skills were put to the test many times. He played a key role in negotiations with Elizabeth I of England. These talks were often tense and fraught with danger. Melville had to navigate the complex relationship between the two queens. His reports provided Mary with crucial insights into Elizabeth's court and intentions.
In addition to my work abroad, I served as an advisor at home. I was a member of Mary's Privy Council. My international experience made me a valuable asset in domestic politics. I often provided counsel on foreign affairs and diplomatic strategy. My advice helped shape Scotland's foreign policy during Mary's reign. I was known for my loyalty to Mary. I remained devoted to her even during her most difficult times.
His memoirs provide valuable insights into the Scottish court of the 16th century. They offer a first-hand account of the intrigues and challenges of Mary's reign. Melville's writings have become an important historical source for understanding this period. Section 5. The Powerful Earls, Shaping Scotland's Destiny. The Earls played a significant role in Scottish politics during Mary's reign. Men like James Douglas, Earl of Morton, wielded considerable power. They controlled vast estates and commanded loyal followers. The Earls were a force to be reckoned with in both peace and war. Their support could make or break a monarch's rule.
I served as Lord Chancellor of Scotland. This position gave me great authority in legal and administrative matters. I was known for my Protestant beliefs. I often clashed with Mary over religious issues. My actions would have far-reaching consequences for the Queen and the kingdom.
The Earls were often involved in internal conflicts. They fought amongst themselves for power and influence. These feuds could escalate into full-scale battles. The nobility's private armies were a constant threat to peace in the realm. Mary had to navigate these conflicts carefully to maintain stability. External threats also brought the Earls to the forefront. They played crucial roles in defending Scotland's borders. The Earls led troops in battles against England. Their military prowess was essential for protecting Scottish sovereignty. However, their power also made them potential threats to the crown. Mary had to balance rewarding their service with limiting their ambitions. Section 6. The lasting impact of Mary's power players. The individuals who surrounded Mary, Queen of Scots, left an indelible mark on history. Their actions shaped the course of Scottish politics for generations. From Uncle Hobbs Ormiston's management of the royal stables to William Maitland's diplomatic maneuverings, each played a vital role. Their collective efforts kept the wheels of government turning during turbulent times. The diplomats like Sir James Melville helped position Scotland on the European stage. Their work was crucial in maintaining Scotland's independence. They navigated the complex web of alliances and rivalries between nations. Their efforts often determined whether Scotland would face war or enjoy peace. The legacy of their diplomatic work can still be felt in modern international relations. The powerful earls left perhaps the most lasting impact. Their struggles for power and influence would continue long after Mary's reign. The conflicts between noble families shaped Scottish politics for centuries. The balance of power between the monarchy and nobility remained a central issue. Many of the political structures established during this time would endure into the modern era. In conclusion, the power players of Mary, Queen of Scots' court were more than just historical figures. They were the architects of Scotland's future. Their decisions and actions set the stage for the union with England and the birth of Great Britain. Understanding their roles provides valuable insights into the formation of modern Scotland. Their stories continue to fascinate and inform us centuries after their time.
And then Matthew Stuart, Earl of Lennox, father of Darnley, and chief accuser of Mary Stuart after Darnley's murder. So the Lennox family was pretty powerful, and Mary knew that if he married this guy, Darnley, that he would have a lot more right to England and Scotland. So it was a political move on her part, a strategic move on her part, and there's a lot to be said about that family. The Scottish lord and laird who sometimes supported Queen Mary, sometimes rebelled against her, were now in league, now at odds, and almost all died by violence. And they list them all there. So they'd be like the Earl of Argyll, Earl of Arran, Earl of Erskine, Earl of Gordon, so on and so forth. Those are all the different Scottish lords that are part of Mary's line. In their country, they're all trying to control their estate, and they're trying to control the king and queen. Because if there's any changes with that, then their possibility of losing their land, there's risk. Because whoever new comes in to take charge, they could lose their land if they're not right with the king and queen. When James, Mary's son, was named king, that really was a problem for all these lords. Because now he was old enough and he could really rule, he can control his country. There's always a big concern that a child is going to be killed or poisoned or whatever, because then these lords have control. So as long as the child was underage, the lords were more in control of the country, and they enjoyed that. So that was a concern for all of these lords. There's the constant battle as to who's going to be in charge.
Mary Stuart, better known as Mary, Queen of Scots, returned to her homeland in 1561 after spending most of her life in France. She was just 18 years old and already a widow, having lost her first husband, Francis II of France, to illness. Mary's return to Scotland marked the beginning of a tumultuous period in Scottish history, filled with political intrigue, religious tensions, and power struggles among the nobility. The young queen faced numerous challenges upon her arrival. Scotland was a country divided by religious reformation, with Protestants gaining ground against the traditional Catholic faith. Mary, a Catholic herself, had to navigate this religious landscape carefully to avoid alienating either side. She also had to contend with a powerful and often fractious nobility, who saw her as both an opportunity and a threat to their own ambitions. Mary's early years as queen were marked by her attempts to establish her authority and win the loyalty of her subjects. She tried to strike a balance between her Catholic faith and the growing Protestant movement, led by the fiery preacher John Knox. This delicate balancing act would prove to be one of the defining challenges of her reign, as she sought to maintain her own religious convictions while appeasing the powerful Protestant lords. Despite these challenges, Mary initially enjoyed some success in her rule. She was known for her charm, intelligence, and beauty, qualities that helped her win over many of her subjects. However, the political landscape of Scotland was complex and ever-changing, with alliances forming and breaking apart with alarming frequency. It was in this volatile environment that Mary would soon make a decision that would have far-reaching consequences for her reign and for Scotland itself. As a young, widowed queen, Mary's marriage prospects were a matter of great political importance. Many suitors vied for her hand, each bringing their own set of political advantages and disadvantages. After much deliberation and negotiation, Mary made a choice that would prove to be both strategically important and personally disastrous. She decided to marry Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. Lord Darnley was a young Scottish nobleman with a strong claim to the English throne. This made him an attractive choice for Mary, who harboured ambitions of one day claiming the English crown for herself. By marrying Darnley, Mary strengthened her own claim and potentially united two powerful dynastic lines. However, this decision was not without its risks and opponents. Many of Mary's advisors, including her half-brother James Stuart, Earl of Moray, strongly opposed the match. They saw Darnley as arrogant, immature, and potentially dangerous to Mary's rule. Despite these warnings, Mary proceeded with the marriage, which took place in July 1565. The union initially seemed to strengthen Mary's position, but it soon became clear that Darnley was not the ideal consort she had hoped for. Darnley proved to be vain, ambitious, and prone to excessive drinking and other vices. He demanded to be named King of Scots, a title that Mary reluctantly granted him. However, his behaviour became increasingly erratic and violent, causing rifts in the royal court and among the nobility. This marriage, intended as a strategic move to consolidate power, would instead become a source of instability and conflict that would haunt Mary for the rest of her reign. The marriage of Mary to Lord Darnley brought the powerful Lennox family into the centre of Scottish politics. The Lennoxes were an old and influential noble house with strong connections to both Scotland and England. Matthew Stuart, 4th Earl of Lennox, was Darnley's father and now found himself in a position of great influence as the father-in-law to the Queen of Scots. The Earl of Lennox had spent many years in exile in England, where he had cultivated close ties with the Tudor court. His return to Scotland and his son's marriage to Mary were seen by many as a potential shift in the balance of power. The Lennoxes represented a pro-English faction within the Scottish nobility, which alarmed those who feared too much English influence in Scottish affairs. With Darnley's elevation to King of Scots, the Lennox family's influence grew even stronger. They began to assert themselves in matters of state, often to the frustration of other noble families who saw their own power and influence waning. This shift in the political landscape created new tensions and rivalries among the Scottish lords, many of whom began to resent the Lennoxes' sudden rise to prominence. However, the Lennox family's fortunes were closely tied to Darnley's behaviour and relationship with Mary. As Darnley's conduct became increasingly problematic, the Lennoxes found themselves in a precarious position. They tried to maintain their influence while also attempting to manage their wayward son, a task that would prove increasingly difficult as events unfolded. The Scottish nobility during Mary's reign was a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and shifting loyalties. These powerful lords held significant sway over their own territories and could raise armies to support or oppose the crown as they saw fit. Understanding the dynamics between these noble houses is crucial to grasping the political landscape of 16th century Scotland. Among the most prominent noble families were the Hamiltons, the Douglases, the Campbells, and the Gordons. Each of these families had their own ambitions and agendas, often at odds with one another and sometimes with the crown itself. The Hamiltons, for instance, were next in line to the throne after Mary and saw themselves as potential rulers should anything happen to the Queen. This position made them both valuable allies and potential threats to Mary's rule. The loyalties of these lords were rarely fixed and could change based on personal interests, religious affiliations, or political expediency. For example, the Earl of Moray, Mary's half-brother, initially supported her rule, but later led a rebellion against her when she married Darnley. Such shifts in allegiance were common and contributed to the volatile nature of Scottish politics during this period. Religious divisions also played a significant role in shaping alliances among the nobility. As the Protestant Reformation gained ground in Scotland, many lords embraced the new faith, while others remained staunchly Catholic. This religious split often aligned with political factions, with Protestant lords generally favouring closer ties with England, while Catholic nobles looked to France and other Catholic powers for support. These religious and political divisions would continue to shape Scottish politics long after Mary's reign. Section 5. The rise of the Earl of Moray. James Stuart, Earl of Moray, was one of the most influential figures in Scottish politics during Mary's reign. As Mary's illegitimate half-brother, he held a unique position that allowed him to wield significant power while also posing a potential threat to Mary's rule. Moray was a skilled politician and a committed Protestant, factors that made him both a valuable ally and a formidable opponent to the Catholic Queen. Initially, Moray served as one of Mary's chief advisors upon her return to Scotland. He helped her navigate the complex political and religious landscape, advocating for a moderate approach that would appease both Catholics and Protestants. However, this alliance was not destined to last. When Mary announced her intention to marry Lord Darnley, Moray strongly opposed the match, seeing it as a threat to his own influence and to the Protestant cause in Scotland. Moray's opposition to the Darnley marriage led to a dramatic falling out with Mary. He and several other Protestant lords staged a rebellion known as the Chaseabout Raid, attempting to prevent the marriage and assert their own power. The rebellion failed, and Moray was forced to flee to England, where he remained in exile for several years. This period marked a low point in Moray's career, but events would soon turn in his favour. Following the murder of Lord Darnley and Mary's subsequent marriage to the Earl of Bothwell, Moray returned to Scotland. He played a key role in forcing Mary's abdication and was appointed regent for the infant King James VI. As regent, Moray effectively ruled Scotland, pursuing a pro-Protestant and pro-English policy. His rise to power demonstrated the fluid nature of Scottish politics and the opportunities that existed for skilled and ambitious nobles to seize control in times of crisis. Section 6. The brutal murder of Lord Darnley. The murder of Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, on February 10, 1567, was a shocking event that would have far-reaching consequences for Mary's reign and for Scotland as a whole. Darnley was found dead in the garden of Kirkhofield, a church near Edinburgh, following an explosion at the house where he had been staying. The circumstances of his death were suspicious from the outset, leading to immediate speculation about who was responsible. The murder of Darnley was not entirely unexpected, given his increasingly erratic and dangerous behaviour. He had made many enemies at court, including among Mary's closest advisors. Darnley had been involved in the murder of Mary's secretary, David Rizzio, just a year earlier, an act that had severely strained his relationship with the Queen. Despite a brief reconciliation following the birth of their son James, the marriage remained troubled. Suspicion for Darnley's murder quickly fell on James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, one of Mary's most powerful supporters. Bothwell was known to be ambitious and ruthless, and many believed he had orchestrated the murder with Mary's knowledge or even at her behest. While Bothwell was put on trial for the murder, he was acquitted in a hasty and widely criticised proceeding. The aftermath of Darnley's murder would prove disastrous for Mary. Her decision to marry Bothwell just months after Darnley's death led many to believe she had been complicit in her husband's murder. This perception, whether accurate or not, would severely damage Mary's reputation and contribute to her eventual downfall. The murder of Darnley and its consequences would reshape the political landscape of Scotland, leading to Mary's forced abdication and exile, and paving the way for a new era in Scottish history. Section 7. Mary's imprisonment and abdication. The events following Darnley's murder unfolded rapidly, leading to a crisis that would ultimately end Mary's reign as Queen of Scots. Her marriage to Bothwell, which took place just 3 months after Darnley's death, was met with widespread outrage and condemnation. Many of the Scottish lords, who had long been wary of Bothwell's influence, saw this as the final straw. A confederation of lords, both Protestant and Catholic, rose up against Mary and Bothwell. They confronted the royal couple at Carberry Hill in June 1567. Although no battle was fought, Mary was forced to surrender herself to the lords, while Bothwell was allowed to flee. This marked the beginning of Mary's imprisonment and the end of her active rule as Queen of Scots. Mary was initially held at Lochleven Castle, where she was pressured to abdicate the throne in favour of her infant son, James. On July 24, 1567, under duress, Mary signed the instruments of abdication, formally relinquishing her crown. Her young son was crowned as James VI of Scotland, with the Earl of Moray appointed as regent to rule in his name. This forced abdication marked a turning point in Scottish history. Mary, who had once been a symbol of hope and renewal for Scotland, was now a prisoner in her own kingdom. Her reign, which had begun with such promise, had ended in disgrace and defeat. The political landscape of Scotland was irrevocably altered, with power now firmly in the hands of the Protestant lords who had opposed Mary's rule. Section 8, the Regency period. Following Mary's abdication, Scotland entered a period known as the Regency. With the infant James VI, now king, the country was effectively ruled by a series of regents who governed on behalf of the young monarch. This period was characterized by continued political instability and power struggles among the nobility, as various factions vied for control of the government and influence over the young king. The first regent was James Stuart, Earl of Moray, Mary's half-brother. Moray's regency was marked by efforts to consolidate Protestant power in Scotland and to forge closer ties with England. However, his rule was cut short when he was assassinated in 1570, plunging the country into further chaos. The assassination of Moray highlighted the dangerous and volatile nature of Scottish politics during this period. Following Moray's death, several other nobles held the position of regent, including Matthew Stuart, Earl of Lennox, Darnley's father, and James Douglas, Earl of Morton. Each of these regents faced significant challenges in maintaining order and authority in a country still deeply divided by religious and political factions. The constant changes in leadership during this period contributed to ongoing instability and uncertainty. Throughout the Regency period, there remained a faction loyal to Mary who continued to view her as the rightful queen. These supporters, known as the Queen's Men, engaged in various plots and intrigues aimed at restoring Mary to the throne. However, their efforts were ultimately unsuccessful, and Mary remained a prisoner, first in Scotland and later in England, where she had fled seeking the protection of her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. Section 9. James VI's early reign. As James VI grew older, he began to take a more active role in governing Scotland. His early years were shaped by the influence of various noble factions and his education under the renowned scholar George Buchanan. James proved to be an intelligent and capable ruler, skilled in the art of statecraft and keenly aware of the complexities of Scottish politics. One of James's primary challenges was to assert his authority over the powerful noble houses that had dominated Scottish politics during his minority. He employed a combination of diplomacy, strategic alliances, and, when necessary, force to bring the nobles under control. James also worked to balance the interests of the various religious factions in Scotland, pursuing a moderate policy that aimed to maintain peace between Catholics and Protestants. James's reign saw a gradual strengthening of royal authority in Scotland. He implemented reforms in the legal system and worked to improve the financial stability of the crown. James also pursued a policy of reconciliation with some of the noble families that had opposed his mother, recognizing the need for unity in the face of ongoing challenges to royal authority. One of the defining features of James's early reign was his relationship with England. As the heir presumptive to the childless Elizabeth I, James cultivated close ties with the English court. This policy of friendship with England marked a significant shift from the traditional Scottish alliance with France and would have far-reaching consequences for both kingdoms. James's eventual succession to the English throne in 1603 would unite the crowns of Scotland and England, forever changing the political landscape of Britain. Section 10. The constant power struggles. Throughout Mary's reign and the subsequent Regency period, Scotland was marked by constant power struggles among the nobility. These conflicts were not merely personal rivalries, but reflected deeper divisions within Scottish society, including religious differences, regional loyalties, and competing visions for the country's future. The stakes in these power struggles were high, with lords risking not only their political influence, but also their lands, wealth, and sometimes their lives. One of the key factors in these power struggles was the control of land. In feudal Scotland, land ownership was closely tied to political power and military strength. Lords who controlled large estates could raise significant forces to support their causes. The acquisition or loss of land could dramatically alter the balance of power among the nobility. As a result, marriages, inheritances, and royal grants of land were all critical factors in the ever-shifting alliances among the Scottish lords. Religious divisions added another layer of complexity to these power struggles. The Protestant Reformation had taken firm root in Scotland, but there remained a significant Catholic minority, particularly among the old nobility. These religious differences often aligned with political factions, with Protestant lords generally favouring closer ties with England, while Catholic nobles looked to France and other Catholic powers for support.
And then there's the Queen Mary. These are the different Mary that were assigned to Mary, Queen of Scots, at a young age, so that she'd have playmate. That's Mary Beaton, Mary Fleming, Mary Livingstone, Mary Seton, and they were raised with her. They were like her playmate, and then they were her ladies-in-waiting, and they would travel with her when she was sent over to France. When Mary was young, because of all the battling that's going on after her father died, her mother, Maria de Guise, she decided to send Mary to the French court to be raised. And I think Mary was only about 4 or 5 years old when her mother sent her over there to be raised, because it was so much of a concern that she was going to be killed or harmed or kidnapped. And so he needed more protection for her. Well, these Marys went with Mary Queen of Scots. They were like her sisters almost. But they were children of the noble, these lords, these Scottish lords. For whatever reason, they were all named Mary. And I think part of that is because it's the protection for Mary Queen of Scots, that if anybody wanted to lay blame, they could not figure out which Mary it was. And there are some things that will come up later in the story where documents, like the casket letters, supposedly they were written by Mary Queen of Scots, that he was writing about her love life and about politics and this and that. And it appears that these casket letters have been doctored. Well, a couple of these Marys married into different noble families. There's one instance where one of these Marys, through the pressure of her noble husband, doctored up some of these casket letters, which was not a good light on Mary Queen of Scots. The point of that is that as these girls were growing up, they were all taught the same thing. They were all taught handwriting, so their handwriting was all the same. If later on they needed to sign something or write something on behalf of Mary Queen of Scots, their handwriting would be so close, nobody would really know if it was Mary Queen of Scots or one of her ladies-in-waiting. So that was something that occurred later on, where one of the Marys was used, probably against her will, I would think, but she is married into one of these noble families, and the pressure was on for them to change some of the documents. The next person on this list, John Knox, he is also somehow related, probably through marriage, to the Ormistons and the Hepburn. He was a Calvinist minister, a fierce adversary of Mary Stuart. He was constantly stirring the pot, going out there and ministering to people. And he was not Catholic. He was a Calvin. The Ormistons were Protestant. We pronounced it as Protestant. But back then, they named themselves Protestant. They were really Protestant against the Catholic Church, but so they would consider themselves Protestant. David Rizzio, he was a musician and a secretary to Mary. He came over from France. He was murdered. This is the instance where he was murdered in her presence when she was pregnant. And it was because the Scottish lord, the nobleman, were really upset about how much attention this David Rizzio was getting from Mary. They wanted her attention, and she didn't want to pay attention to them. He wanted to be like the French people are. French people are pretty much loving, they're romantic, they like nice things, and they didn't have that kind of stuff going on in Scotland. It's a very rugged, rough country, and there's not much genteelism. And so she would relax with her friend and the people that she knew in France. They would come over to entertain her, and they were jealous of this guy, and so they killed him. He had to be very strong through that whole period of time, and it was not easy, I'm sure. George Buchanan, Latin master to Queen Mary, author, and tutor to King James. So obviously he was important. Then we have all the French characters and all the players, the main people in Mary's life in France and England. Like in France, Henry II was the King of France at the time that Mary went over there to be raised in her childhood. Catherine de Medici was his wife. It was Francis, who was their eldest son, and Mary's first husband. They were betrothed at a young age. They got married when I think they were only 16 years old. He became ill and he died at a young age, which is why Mary ended up coming back to Scotland. I think she probably stayed in France, but when he died, that changed everything for her on the political scene. It was almost like they really didn't want her there. And she wanted to be queen. So she's like, well, I'm Queen of Scotland, so I'm going back to Scotland. And so that's why she came back, and she came back to a very rough country. She could have just resigned herself to a nice cottage in the country in France, but she decided to go back to Scotland, and that's when all of her troubles really began. Charles IX was the second son of the King and Queen of France. Henry III was their third son. Moving over here to England, there's Henry VII, Henry VIII. They're kind of big players. Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife is the one that had Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. And so in actuality, Queen Elizabeth ended up taking over in England. She was about 10 years older than Mary in Scotland. So Queen Elizabeth was always very jealous of Queen Mary. Mary was beautiful, and I think Queen Elizabeth was really concerned about not being able to control her own country. So she was very political and very much always trying to protect herself and England. They are actually cousins to the Henry VIII line. Then there's the other Mary. One is the first wife of Henry VIII. They did have a daughter, and she did mature, but she died from an illness. Henry VIII's first wife, she died, and he was looking for male heirs. And so he started, just marrying all these different women. And it was Anne Boleyn who had Elizabeth. She was the only one that really survived. So the one point I want to make here is that he really wanted to divorce his first wife, Henry VIII, but because they were considered Catholic, they could not divorce. And so they actually came up with the Church of England. They came up with a new religion, Church of England, which allowed him to divorce his first wife. And then he was able to marry all those other wives. It allowed him to execute his wife and allowed him to continue marrying other wives.